Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 93. I'm talking to Doug Barbieri, who has worked as a software engineer and currently lives in Argentina right now. He's married to a woman down there, and we're going to talk about Javier Milei, the political prospects for Argentina, and also his expat life and other things like that. So how are you, Doug?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So how did you get into libertarianism or anarchism?
It was a long process. Initially, it was by reading Ron Paul's essays and watching whatever I could find with Ron Paul, kind of like, oh, wow, okay. He turned me on to the problems of the Fed, and like I didn't even know what the Fed was. And he was responsible for sort of awakening me. And then I started following Jeff Berwick's blog, the Dollar Vigilante. Yeah. And I read that for years. And then there was this thing called Anarchapulco, and it sounded really interesting. And so I went to that in 2016. And it was really refreshing to meet people of like minds. And of course, where I was living is the middle of statism, capital of the world, California, right? And I was surrounded by people with that kind of mentality. And it was really a great thing to go and get this completely different perspective, talk to different people with different perspectives that had more of on the side of anarchy, which I found myself really kind of leaning toward, moving more and more toward. I initially was libertarian, and then pretty soon I realized, after reading lots of literature on the subject, it's like, I don't really have much use for government. It's actually the single biggest problem on the planet that humanity faces. So anyway, I finally decided, I'm going to go, but to this thing called Anarchapulco. I had a big fight with my ex-wife about it, and my friends are telling me, don't go there. It's the murder capital of the world, Acapulco. Went anyway, and had a great time. And then I wasn't able to go in 2017 or 2018, but I went through a divorce in 2018, and I thought, I'm going to go down. Not only am I going to go to Anarchapulco, but I'm going to live down there. I'm going to give this a shot. My kids are grown. We went through a divorce. I'm done with that phase of my life. My ex bought me out of my house. I'm like, I'm going to go down there. And I moved to Acapulco, went to Anarchapulco 2019, and really it was a really life-changing experience for me in so many ways. Did a lot of healing down there in that area. Mexico just has that vibe, Believe it or not, I know there's people go to Tijuana for the hookers and blow, but Mexico has a lot of indigenous healing properties and medicines and that sort of thing.
So I'm a very diverse country. It's a lot more diverse than people realize.
It really is. It really is. It's not. In fact, it's not really at all what I thought it was going to be. I had a lot of preconceived notions and things. There's if you listen to people like Donald Trump, he calls it a shithole. There's people that trash Mexico, and when you go there and you live, and I didn't realize how beautiful the country really was. I had to go there and experience it. And then I met my wife. She's originally Argentine. Her name's Sol. She's Argentinian, but she was living in Mexico at the time. And we traveled all up and down Mexico by car and experienced all these different cities. And we had the best time. And I was like, wow, this is a really incredible country. I just had no idea. And so we lived there. We stayed in Acapulco for about a year. And I went to 2019 and 2020 on Acapulco's. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and we had moved to a city called Guadalajara. And that was probably the best place for us to be during that time, because even though they had mask mandates, and they had they shut down a lot of restaurants, and they had all these quirky, weird rules and stuff like that they've been. I mean, everybody had the same stupid rules: masks, social distancing, plastic barriers, all that other stuff. But at least they weren't locking down the streets, and the airports remained open. And so, okay, this is probably the best country to be in right now. And aside from, if I could have gone to Sweden, I would have, right? And we stayed there through the entire pandemic, and then we got married in 2021, and then we decided, let's move to Argentina. So we moved in 2022. So that's been my Latin American experience so far. 3 years in Mexico, and I basically spent a year here in Argentina. And it's been quite a wild ride, but it's been a lot of fun and very life-changing, life-altering, and in many great ways.
Yeah.
So that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, so you haven't been there that long now. So, what do you think of the current situation in Argentina, and of course Javier Milei and his run for the presidency?
So the interesting thing is, I moved down here. Now I knew I've been watching and seeing. There's a lot of socialism in Latin America in general. You see these countries that get wrecked, like Venezuela, because they're following socialist policies, right? Trashing their economy. But then at the same time, there's also this real entrepreneurial capitalist spirit. So like the Mexicans have it, and so do the Argentinians. So there's like this, dichotomy, but the socialists have been typically big in government. So when I got down here, I was like, okay, we'll just get ready. Like I was walking around in Buenos Aires, and there's like this, that's my favorite cafe here. And right next door is this, what do you call it? This meeting room for, the leftist front. Like, oh, geez, man, it's serious socialism right here. So I had no idea that there was this guy called Milei until a libertarian friend of mine in the United States asked me, well, what do you think about Milei? I'm like, who's this Milei guy? So I started binge watching his YouTube videos. I'm like, wow, he is a breath of fresh air. Yep, on the state, he's still a libertarian, still statist, right? In the sense that, he wants to go into office and try to change things from within.
Yeah.
But there was
status, yes.
Yeah, but there was an interview I saw with him where they asked him point blank, how do you feel? How do you identify? He says, I'm an anarchist. He says, but I'm also a realist, and I realize, I would prefer a world with no state, with no government. He says, but we can't have that. And so I want to go in and try to minimize the damage that the state is doing. And so, that's his point of view. I mean, he's kind of like a Ron Paul. Many people try to compare him to Trump. I'd actually compare him to Ron Paul, because he's actually, first of all, he's an Austrian economist, trained Austrian economist, and he understands the problem is the central bank, and he wants to get rid of it. And he teaches people all about what they're doing with their currency and why. People think, oh, well, it's because we have capitalism and all these evil things, and you see the Peronistas down here. They turn around, they try to blame it on the evil capitalists, and he's just like, no, it's the central bank run by the government, and these people are what he calls chorros, and chorros is slang for crooks, criminals, robbers,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's what he calls these people,
Yeah.
So yeah, he's and he's making waves because he's pointing out the problems, and he's putting them in a new light, saying, look, it's because of the government. The government is doing all of this stuff. And his philosophy is, I'm going to come in with, they call a motosierra, which is a chainsaw. And he wants to just, gut government, just cut this, cut that. We don't need that. We don't need this. And the people that like him, they love him, and he's got quite a following. He's kind of like a rock star. It's really interesting. So anyway, that's how I found out about him, and I started binge watching, and I started showing videos to my wife, and she's like going, "This guy's incredible." he has so much understanding. He explains everything really well, but she also loves his Argentinian passion. I mean, he is definitely Argentinian, especially if you've ever watched any of his stuff. He goes off, man. He gets passionate about the stuff, and I've seen interviews where he won't shut up, trying to, like, he's like in a panel and they're trying to be fair and give everybody their due, but somebody will say something that he just can't stand, and he'll start going off on them, and they're like, oh, can you just be quiet? And he's like, no. He's really a character. But so we'll see what happens. There's the one hand where I'm like, yeah, voting is voting, and voting gets you, to petition to the slave masters, like, please don't do these bad things to us. Can you, like, not punish us as hard? And I get that. And that is a problem. And he is trying to go in and fix the problem from within. We'll see if he can do it. But at the very least, like, I at least go, the benefit was like what Ron Paul brought when he ran for president, is that he at least educated people. He opened people's eyes. He put discussions that weren't being had on the table. Like, let's talk about the Fed, which we never talk about. And at least he forced the conversation. Well, that's what Milei is doing. Milei is actually forcing that conversation, and he's waking people up to what's going on.
Yeah, the comparisons to Trump just show that the left has no ability to distinguish any. They just see people who aren't on their side, and that's all they see. They can't distinguish them at all. Of course,
no.
Of course, the big difference between Ron Paul and Milei is, I guess we could say that Milei is probably ahead in the game at halftime, or maybe even at the end of the third quarter.
Yeah, and he actually won what they call the primary.
Yes. Yeah, he was the leading vote getter in the primary with about 30%. So he is the front runner, and I don't know, and and people are saying he has a good chance. I mean, let's face it, Milei is leading at halftime, or maybe even leading at the end of the third quarter, and Ron Paul, on the other hand, basically scored a meaningless touchdown with about 2 minutes left when he was losing 42-0.
Yeah, it was more like he got that field goal.
Ron Paul has had no impact on America. I mean, that's the simple fact. Milei is already having an impact on America.
I will agree with you on that. It's much, much bigger than Ron Paul ever could have hoped for.
It's. I mean, you're also unusual in the sense. It sounds like you're a much older person who considers Ron Paul, an influence.
Yes, well, I'm 58, and
because you had never read anything, you had never encountered anything before that, I guess, or you never really got interested in it. My dad was hardcore Republican, right? Okay,
and he was big time Reaganite, but he always used to say something that not a lot of people said, even in his day. The Republicans kind of didn't talk. I guess Reagan did talk like this, and that's what influenced my dad. But he always talked about small government, and he considered himself a small government Republican. He was like, we need to reduce the influence of government. We need to. He didn't really say go back to the Constitution, but he was talking about limiting the reach of government, limiting what it does, and because it's a destructive force. And Ronald Reagan, if you ever watched any of his speeches, they actually are pretty brilliant. And one thing, like,
I was very political. I was 9 years old when Reagan was elected, so I was just becoming politically aware at the time.
Oh,
so I definitely remember Reagan.
And he said the problem is government. I love that.
Reagan could put out a lot of pretty words, but he wasn't really. I don't think he was ever sincere about it.
Murray Rothbard wrote a sort of post-mortem of his presidency, and he said that he was like very disenfranchised by what Reagan did in the end. And he said that Reagan kind of eclipsed other small government, because there was a wave that was going on in the United States at that time where people were saying, we need to reduce the influence of government. We had runaway inflation and all of these, the scandal with Watergate and all this other stuff. And people were like, okay, we need to rein this beast back. And that's kind of where, Reagan ran on that, on that sentiment, right? But you had like, what was his name? Was it Goldberg? There was a guy that Ron Paul really liked, and I'm forgetting his name.
Goldwater.
Yeah, Goldwater, and he was like Barry Goldwater, and he was
Barry Goldwater,
truly he was truly a small government candidate, but he got eclipsed by Reagan because Reagan is just, you can't beat Reagan's charisma. And,
yeah,
I mean, you can't.
Reagan,
Even Reagan's haters loved Reagan.
yeah. There's no president in my lifetime ever came to the close to the popularity of Reagan. I think Reagan, if he'd actually believed in all that stuff, really could have accomplished something, but he didn't. But he didn't believe in it, and
Well, I think he believed in it, but he just couldn't. He couldn't make it happen. It's like he was probably being used by certain forces, and I mean, like I pointed out to my dad in the end, I says, he tripled the deficit.
Oh, yeah.
He grew government like crazy. My dad says it was the Democrats, fault of the Democrats. Like he couldn't, he couldn't see, he couldn't give anything to that. He's Reagan was perfect. It was everybody else's fault. It's like, well, no. So if you ever have a chance,
and I think really the worst thing that can be said about Reagan also was that he was at least indirectly responsible for us having 12 years of the Bushes.
I do agree with that, and I remember when his running mate HW ran.
Oh yeah,
for president, and I just went, I hate this guy, and I'm like, what happened? Because it was like, we had this, we had this small government. Yeah, let's let's bring it down, and all of a sudden you get HW Bush, and he wasn't speaking at all like. He was talking about
that entire clan just destroyed, and really that entire clan destroyed the country more than anybody. I don't. But anyway, I don't want to stick with that. So let's get back.
I agree.
Sorry, we got off traffic. Let's get back to Milei.
Right.
So you've been paying it. Is there anybody else? One thing we've been thinking about lately, or at least I've been thinking about lately. But where do you think Milei is getting his money? Is it just small grassroots donations, or does he have some big funders, or what's going on there?
I don't know. I can't really comment because I haven't looked into it. That's one of the things that kind of scares me is, where is he getting the money? I've heard theories that he's really, what do they call it? WEF shill, and, he's really sent in to destabilize it. I don't know. But I can't imagine that these guys sent out somebody from their clan to trash the central bank and get rid of it. I'm having a hard time believing that, because that's not a message that they ever want people to start talking about.
Yeah.
The central bank is, you just don't talk about the central bank. It's just, it does, and yet he's saying, no, he's putting it at the center of the problems of this country. And that's really unusual. So if he's a WEF shill, I don't know. So who knows? But it could be that he's getting his money grassroots. But you know what? I don't know. I personally haven't looked into it. That's my bad, and I should. But
it might not be that easy to look into, and
or at least make an effort.
It's just very interesting. Also, are there any prominent citizens of other prominent people in the country who are supporting Milei right now? I mean, I don't know. I suppose an endorsement from somebody like Messi would be valuable if he got that, but
I don't. I haven't seen if he is. I think Messi is just staying out of politics, which is probably smart.
Which is a smart move if you're not.
Yeah, he's actually. I will say one thing about Messi is he at least is. He brings forth a really good culture for this country, because his predecessor, the real famous Maradona, was a womanizer, and he had a child in every country, and I mean, he was terrible into drugs. Messi is completely squeaky clean. He doesn't do any drugs at all. He's married and loves his wife, and he never cheats. And he's just like this really good guy. He's amazing. And so he just keeps his nose out of that. And he's the national hero that wins soccer matches. We bring him in when we want to win the game, kind of thing, and
Yeah.
everyone loves him. So he's just keeping his nose out of any of that I've ever seen. So yeah, it'd be great, but I don't, no, it's probably smart of him to just stay out. But as
It's
far
definitely
as
smarter. Yeah, if you're an athlete, it's usually smarter, but you never know sometimes.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that actors and they should just keep their mouths shut about that stuff, because they just wind up sticking their foot in it. But anyway, yeah, I don't know of any. The only thing I will say
Yeah.
is it is I've watched the news programs that he's been on, and I've been shocked that they're not trying to cut him off. They're not re-editing his words, and he's brought on, and they give him his due. They let him speak, and they let him state his opinion and his evidence. And it's not like American news media. American news media is just so freaking biased that
Yes.
you don't see any Ron Paul. And when they did let him speak, you got like 2 seconds worth, and you never really got into. Nobody wants to hear the details. Whereas like he will just have lectures where they'll put him on for a couple of hours, and he will just talk about what the problems are and how we fix them. And I'm like, wow. And that's why Soledad just loves him, because he explains all of this stuff. He explains everything that's going on in ways that people can understand. And that it's really, that's a huge cultural difference from what I can see in being in the United States, is that people seem to be a little more, they're more tolerant to longer explanations. They aren't living on 30-second sound bites. And because people are suffering here, they really are. This inflation is hurting real people, and they know it. They see it. They see it happening. They just like, wait a minute. Because I remember when we got married here in 2021, we just visited here, got married, and then left, and the inflation was like about 100 pesos to the dollar, right? 150, maybe two. So like 2,000 pesos was a decent amount of money. That's a lot. Now 2,000 pesos, you could throw it out on the street and you wouldn't cry. It's just like hardly anything. And now it's like the unofficial blue dollar rate is 730 pesos to the dollar. This is crazy inflation.
Yes.
And people see it. They don't want to put prices up on stores because they have to keep or if they do put prices, it's done on a whiteboard so they can erase it and move it up. And Soledad was telling me about several suppliers of, she's into candle making and soap making, and the suppliers just say, we have to shut down right now because we have to reprice everything. It's chaos, and this hurts real people. This impoverishes people, and Milei is channeling that frustration. He's going on that frustration, and he's calling these people out, saying, look, the people that are doing this to you are the government. There's nobody else that is doing this. It's not capitalism. It's not evil fascists. It's the government. And it's the central bank chiefly that is doing this to you, and we need to get rid of it. And that's why he wants to go with the dollar standard. So dollarize the country, effectively.
Yeah.
Which,
I think that, the toughest thing about, having inflation like this also, though, is it makes it impossible to do any long-term planning, or even any medium-term planning. You can't plan 6 months ahead. You can't plan a year ahead.
No, it makes it very hard, especially when your medium of exchange just keeps changing, on you. I agree.
I'm hearing that in a way, Milei talks about just putting the economy on the American dollar. That, and in many respects, a lot of people there already are using the dollar, or they're using Bitcoin.
I've always felt that he wants to do it officially, but I've always felt that if they keep doing what they're going to do, even if he doesn't make it into office, even if he never has a chance to do this, it's going to be inevitable anyway, because what's happening is the money is so bad that people are just going to stop using it. And after a while, in the smaller, it's interesting having lived in these different cities that I've been in. I've been in the biggest city, the second largest city, and now I'm in a small city. And the bigger cities, you can typically say, "Hey, can I pay for this in dollars?" And they'll say, "Yeah."
Yeah.
In fact, I mentioned this on the Twitter
Well,
Space
yeah.
talk. I had to get my cell phone repaired, and I walked into a place and I said, "Can I pay in dollars?" And they're like, "Yeah, what's the rate you'll give me?" And they gave me dollar blue, which is like, wow,
Yeah,
this
they
is
give you
great.
blue dollars, which is the unofficial
Yeah,
rate. Yeah,
right.
and I suppose, for example, if you're taking a cab or, getting, or at the restaurant, you probably can just give them tips in dollars.
You can, yeah. I mean, here it's harder to find. I've gone into various places that you
Yeah,
take dollars, and they're like, no, it needs to be pesos,
it's
and
it's harder in the small towns just because, in
yeah,
Buenos Aires, that's where everybody goes.
yes,
That's where the airport is. I mean, if you're going to Argentina,
several airports.
you're going to go to Buenos Aires and then go from
Yeah,
there. And
right. It's the hub.
it's the hub, it's the international hub, and
Yeah.
it's
And it's
it's
got a
really
lot of internet. It's got a lot, very big international population. A lot of expats are there. A lot of, yeah. So you're absolutely right. It's well, I mean, it's bigger city. I mean, I think you probably will find that's true in most
yeah
places. The bigger cities have that. You know, the bigger cities have more access to things like that. So yeah, and then also you can, and you mentioned Bitcoin and crypto. Now, I haven't seen too many places. Oh, well, okay. This is one thing I will tell you is if you're going to buy a house, it doesn't matter where you are, you're going to use dollars, and the houses are priced in dollars. That I thought was
yes
interesting because the quantity of money is so big that it'd be ridiculous if you're going to. What is it like? $100,000 is like 25 million pesos or something. It's like crazy. And so trying to find that amount of money, in pesos is pretty retarded. So
yeah
you're gonna come in with dollars, and everybody works with dollars. The guy I bought my house from works in dollars. He's and he also accepts cryptocurrency. So I was able to pay using cryptocurrency, which is really cool. So that's probably where you're most likely going to find that ingression of dollars and cryptocurrency is going to be in real estate. That's probably most likely place. And I did find that in Buenos Aires, there were a lot of places you could go to, walk right in off the street. It's all legitimate business too. It's not like, some shady thing. You walk right in and you just say, "Hey, I want to exchange. I need, $1,000 worth, and I have Ethereum." Okay. They pass you an Ethereum address. You send the crypto to them. As soon as they have confirmation, they just hand the money over to you. So that was really neat. No identification, no KYC, no nothing. They charge a lot, but it's worth it. It's like 4%, but it's worth it because you immediately get it, no questions asked, which is really great. I can't find any service in some of the smaller towns, but in Buenos Aires, and I was in Cordoba, which is the second largest city in the country, and they had it there. But the smaller places, it's like almost impossible to find. So, but that's, yeah. As
and,
far
and
as go
I
ahead. Sorry.
suppose a lot of this, since it's done in dollars or whatever, is probably more or less just all done off the books too. It's a completely it's an economy that doesn't really ever get taxed or regulated. It sounds like, is it just
Well, okay. So I have had conversations with business owners here, and business owners that decent sized businesses where you hire. I mean, we're talking small business, but where you hire people, and more than one person has told me there is no way you can follow the law and pay all of the fees and follow all of the regulation because you wouldn't make any money. You wouldn't be able to hire anybody following all of the stuff they make you do. So a lot of stuff is kind of under the table, and it's not like you don't pay taxes, but you just shirk as much of it as possible, and then you just pay the bare minimum because the taxes are ridiculous. The bureaucracy is ridiculous. It's really bad, and this is my understanding. I personally don't have.
yeah
not running a business here, but but that's what they tell me. So if you were to be squeaky clean and follow all, cross all the T's and dot all the I's, you wouldn't be in business. That's how crazy that is. So this
Yeah.
encourages a lot of black market stuff, which, and Milei wants to cut all that stuff. He wants to come in and just Moto Sierra that stuff to the ground and make it a lot easier, because that's the chief contributor to poverty, is when it's hard to open a business. And they make it hard to open a business legally, and so you do it, under the table.
And what often happens too is that, is that when somebody does achieve something, and achieves a certain level, eventually, the cartel or whatever will come by and steal it. It's like you might have achieved, enough, maybe you've saved up enough money to save, for a big example, to buy a new car, and they'll just come by. So it becomes impossible to accumulate any capital or anything like that.
There's less of that here in Argentina. In Mexico, there's a lot. The cartels are really big. I don't know. I mean, there's mafia, absolutely, but it's a little different than in Argentina or in Mexico. You have a business that's doing really well, and then the cartel comes and visits you and says, it's a dangerous neighborhood. We can't guarantee you safety unless you pay us. You know what I'm saying? So, but here it's a little less than. I haven't heard any stories or anything about it. I don't think it operates like that. I think the crooks concentrate themselves in government circles, and you see it. You see it with somebody like Christina Kirchner or Fernando Fernandez. He was just really bad. The current president is like, comes on television and he's drunk. He's a real train wreck. And so I think we'll see what happens. I worry for Milei's safety. If he's truly going to come in and change things, they might try to bump him off. So, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
it's.
Yeah, go ahead. One thing I do sometimes, if maybe he's at least possibly getting indirectly supported by the U.S. government, just because he wants to dollarize the economy. I mean, and one thing we've learned from experience is a lot of these foreign people can just take the money and do whatever they want anyway. So, taking money from bad guys does not make you evil per se. It's only if you take orders from the bad guys.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find a way, if you can find a way, and I mean, he understands. Like, I think that he probably deep down would prefer gold, a gold standard, but
or silver or some other
something
metal standard,
like that, and possibly a Bitcoin standard. But he's going with dollars because it's the most pragmatic. The outside world is using dollars. And there's success stories. Ecuador is one of them. I think Zimbabwe did as well. Zimbabwe went through their horrible hyperinflation, and they now, as I understand, have a dollar standard. Panama has it, and the countries are doing really well because they don't have a central bank anymore where they can just arbitrarily inflate to pay debt. They can't do that anymore. And it's funny. I was having a conversation with some Argentinians here about dollarization and versus there's inflation in my country, and I complained. This is like I'd been out of the country and I came back and all the prices had doubled, and they're like, how long has it been since you've been out of the country? I said, well, I was out like since 2019, and they just laughed at me. They're like, we would take that, that would be okay compared to what's happening here. So it's going to be an improvement no matter what, and I see his point. But the biggest thing is that it takes that money printer out of the hands of the government, and that is going to improve. No matter what, that's going to improve the economy. Whether you agree with the other things he has to say, that's going to be a big plus. And I think so. Anyway, we'll see how it happens. I had numerous conversations with different people. Some people are like, "Yeah, go Milei." Others are like, "I don't think he's going to be able to do it because I think they're going to shoot him, or they're going to, he's up against some pretty big." Pretty entrenched people that are used to things the way they are, but at the same time it could be that there may be hardcore Peronistas here and then hardcore socialists, but the majority of the people are kind of had it. They're done with what's happening. They see what's going on, and probably even if they bump the guy off, they wouldn't be able to stop what's happening. So anyway, let's see what happens. I'm filled with hope. I'm an optimistic person by nature, and although I've learned more pessimism just watching things in the political arena, but I do have hope for this. I do think it could be a big success. It could be the best thing that happens to Argentina, and it's not unprecedented. Milei uses precedent. He talks about what happened in Chile when Chile decided to liberalize their economy and open the door to business and basically boot out the socialists. Hang on here for a second.
Well, Chile, did that under Pinochet as they became more capitalistic, and then, and then of course now that they're back to a democracy, socialism is coming into the ballot box.
Yeah, exactly right, and that's the problem is when you open the door, the socialists promise all kinds of free stuff. And when people realize, hey, capitalism isn't a free ride. It's hard. You have to compete. You got to bring products and services that people like. You have to have something people want. You have to do things for people. There's no free ride.
This is what's truly shocking, though, the possible instance that democracy might actually yield good government instead of bad government.
It would be unusual, but it is possible. It's just, I don't know. Sometimes democracy can do well. Like I often cite in California, there's a proposition called Proposition 13 that they successfully limited the inflation of property tax. So property tax can never go up by more than 2% per year. It still goes up, but only by 2%. And that protects homeowners. That keeps people from, being kicked out of their houses because they decided to raise taxes on everybody. And they would do it. They would raise it, and then you'd have no home. And so even in liberal California, the direct democracy was able to yield something good, even though I think that you've got 50, on a typically any bond issue comes up, people vote for that, which I think they're crazy, right? So most of the ballots, most of the things on the ballot box are horrible and they get voted in. But once in a while, something good slips in. So maybe that's just one of those things. What did they say when they founded the United States? They said it requires constant vigilance,
And that's the question. Another question too is, even if Milei does do some good for 8 years, how soon will the people after him screw it up?
Those socialists may get
voters, and of course
they may get a setback, but they're going to come back, and because they, they're filled with hate and with hate for prosperity, and so they're going to come back and they're going to try it again. You're right,
they, you're older than I am. They certainly weren't set back by the events of 1989 or the events of 1991.
Yeah. They did bounce. Well, I mean, it was like one of those things where they went through the dictatorship, they went through all this horrible stuff, and then people saw how bad that was, and then, all right, now we're going to go democracy, and things were good. And then they had the inflation of the early 2000s, which was devastating. And so, you go back and forth. When the good times come, people tend to forget the bad times. Well, right now is kind of a bad time, and it's not as bad as the past, but we're heading in that direction. People are feeling it. And right now, we want Milei. We'll see what happens. If he comes in, fixes everything, reduces the size of government, we have several years of real good pro-capitalist growth, because Argentina is an amazing engine for productivity. There's incredible stuff here, incredible people. If the government gets out of the way, this country could really take off. What will happen in 5 years, 10 years? I don't know. But kind of like you just have to take the good things when they come and write it and then go, let's hope for the best. It's the best you can do.
Yeah. In 89, 91, I was referring, to the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union
Oh,
collapsing.
okay. Sorry.
And, those were that's the thing too. What do you think changed for the voters? I mean, did they? I don't think the voters just started taking smart pills or something like that.
There's
they're still the same voters, right?
There's a thing called, what was that? There was what was the name of that phenomenon? And I'm forgetting the name, but essentially it means you have values, but because of the political situation you're in, like in a country like the Soviet Union, where there's all this repression and you basically have to lie all the time. You can't tell the truth, because otherwise you'll find yourself in Siberia, right? In a gulag. So you can't tell the truth. So everyone lies to each other and they just keep lying. But there's core values that everybody does have, and they push them down, and they disguise and push them down with all the lies and everything like that. And one day it all explodes, and suddenly the people, it seemed like people were going this one way. They go the opposite. And how did that happen? Well, it's because, like, when that happened with the Berlin Wall coming down and the Soviet Union eventually collapsing, is all of a sudden people just stopped, the charade, and the real values started coming out of them. What's it called? I'm forgetting the name of your listeners will probably know, but it's a phenomenon that was described of what happened in the Soviet Union. So, like, why all of a sudden did it just happen? And that's probably why the same thing may be happening too. It may happen in the United States.
I have no idea what word you're talking about. So
it's a phenomenon of, you say one thing, but you really, at your core, you have values that you've repressed, and then those values eventually come out. And I'm forgetting the name of the phenomenon.
Again, and I have no idea what word you're talking about.
But the point is that that's why it happens, and it could be happening in the United States now, where we're being assaulted with all this wokeism, and people are going along with it because they don't want to lose their jobs, or they took the vaccine because they didn't want to lose their jobs, or whatever, right? And all of a sudden, the real values reassert themselves. Like, they call it the silent majority, right? The people put up with it, they repress it. Oh, I'm afraid to say something. And one day, they're no longer afraid, and that could happen in the United States. I think that's kind of happening here. It's just and it usually comes out when you start taking people's food away. And that's when things start changing. That's when you see the revolutions. That's when people start standing up, because now you're starting to affect their bottom line. You're now threatening their family. You're now threatening. It's not just talk anymore. This is real, and people start getting desperate. And that could be where we are now. And hopefully, we are able to turn the ship of state around and go in a better direction for a while, and let's enjoy that while we can. And in the meantime, just keep spreading the truth, doing the best you can.
Are they really pro Milei, or are they just backing him because he's an alternative?
He has a message that is really resonating with people right now, and that message is that freedom, liberty to do what you want with your life, and build your wealth, do the things that you need to do for your family, and not have your money shrunk away, grow in prosperity. I mean, these seem to be resonating with people right now, because they're seeing, they've suffered so many years with people like Christina Kirchner in office, and she's a known crook. I mean, she's actually been put on trial, and she left the country for a while in exile because of her crimes, and now she's back as a vice president. I mean, people are like, how did this crook get back in power?
They voted for her.
And they did, and that's the thing that gets me, So, but I think there's that number of people that they're seeing that, they listened to her lie for so long, and I think people are starting to become numb to the lies, and they're saying, this is because again, the bottom line is being affected. You can talk and do all this stuff. That's great. But when they start taking food off the table, that's when people start changing their tune. And that's what's going on.
Well, it gets to a point when they have nothing to lose. And as some people have said, a lot of people have said Americans are still too comfortable.
Yeah.
Does most of the government, does most of it come from the federal level, or is it more from the provincial level, or even from the local level? Or is it kind of all of them working together to screw things up?
Everything working together to screw things up. Absolutely. Yeah. But the federal government's pretty powerful. It's not really even a federal, but it's like, that's the government. I mean, it's, for example,
you can definitely find a difference, between, say, California and New Hampshire in America. Can you find a difference like that in Argentina?
The United States has a federal system like Mexico, whereas Argentina doesn't. Argentina has a federal government. There are localities, there's provinces, and they have their own governments, and they affect their own local things, and you see that. But in other areas, like for example, in Cordoba, the police are really harsh on the roads, and they give you tickets. And I mean, you have to turn your lights on when you drive, and the police presence is always there. Whereas in like here, in Rio Negro, it's not as bad, right? And so it just you're right. Each province brings its own set of things. Some provinces are freer than others, but the overall, federal government, the government of Argentina, is ever present everywhere, and it's not the same system that we enjoy quote unquote in the United States, or in Mexico. Mexico and the United States actually have very similar systems: the federal government with state governments, and the state governments have a lot of power. The state governments are supposed to be sovereign. Here, that's not the case. It's just a province. In
Mexico and the USA, for example, the license plates on the car are all issued by the states. There's not a Mexican license plate. There's just, whatever state you're in.
And in Argentina, that's not the case. Argentina's one plate for the entire state. So it doesn't matter where you are. You apply to the federal government to get, I keep saying federal government. You apply to the government to get the national government, I should say, to get a plate. And it goes through them, and I think business licenses and everything. The only thing that I noticed was broken up locality was marriage licenses. And that was a significantly different system than in Buenos Aires. Different rules. That was definitely different. So, but my understanding is all the business bureaucracy is pretty much the same throughout the country. So,
well, the other thing too is, and this is something I've noticed in a lot of, not just in Argentina, but you have a country that really is very much dominated by one city. I mean, about 40% of maybe 40% of the population of the country lives in Buenos Aires or around Buenos Aires.
That's correct.
And and you have a similar situation with Lima and Peru, and I think also with Santiago and Chile. But so that. And then the second largest metro area in Argentina is much smaller than that.
Yeah, they call it Capital Federal. There's Buenos Aires has federal capital, okay, and then they call it Capital Federal, or CABA, okay, and that's like these core cities that make up. And it's kind of its own city state, if you will, right? It's its own city province, and then you've got provincia. So what they call provincia. So you've got all these outlying cities in Buenos Aires, Greater Buenos Aires, okay, and it's its own political entity, and so it obviously has great power throughout the entire country. And when you go into other provinces, then you're subject to different rules, but there still is, I think Buenos Aires has giant influence on the entire country, just like these other countries you mentioned. I mean, you could probably say the same thing about Mexico City versus the rest of Mexico, right? You know?
Yeah, yeah, you could say that about Mexico City. Although I will say though that you can fly into other cities in Mexico. You don't have to go through Mexico City to fly there. But yeah, and Mexico City has the state issued license plates and definitely has different state regulations. Some
Yeah, it's kind of, it's its own, it's like its own state, you know, so, which I think is really interesting. Like they call it the state of Mexico.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you're in Rio Negro, which is kind of a little bit far south, but not. You kind of are because you get down there. You're fairly far from Buenos Aires. You're kind of
We,
really getting into no man's land if you go south of there too, aren't you?
well, we're not too far from Antarctica, you know, if you look at the map, you know, Land's End, or the end of the world, as they call it, fin de mundo, is Tierra de Fuego, which means
Yes, of course.
Fireland. I don't know why they call it Fireland. It's cold there,
Yes.
but you can go there, or you can go to Santa Cruz, or those lower provinces, southern provinces. You can see glaciers. They advertise them. It's pretty neat. So I'm interested one of these days to go down there and actually see my very first glacier. But yeah, you're not far at all from Antarctica, and so yeah, this is probably the furthest south I've ever lived in my life on planet Earth. But it really is beautiful here. This area, the Patagonia region, is just gorgeous. It's beautiful forests all over the place. Great skiing. It's Bariloche is very is famous, world famous for skiing, and all year round people come to this town because and from all over the world, which is interesting. I never even heard about Bariloche until I came here, but it's popular with the Europeans. It's popular with, well, obviously Brazil. A lot of Chileans, Brazilians come here. Um, a lot of some Americans are here. A lot of Europeans. So it's interesting to see that mix. But it's a small place, but like if you go downtown in Central, it's like walking down New York City. You know, it's packed with people. There's so many people from all over, and year round. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you probably. Yeah, is that a place where you get all four seasons?
You get all four seasons because you get now the summer. You get a lot of wind off the lake, and you can get some cold days during the summer, but for the most part, it's nice. It's not super hot. Now we haven't I haven't lived here during the summer yet. We'll see what happens, but uh, the wind comes off the lake, and that actually have a cooling effect. So a lot of places don't even have air conditioning. But boy, like in a place like Cordoba, you need air conditioning. It's really hot during the summer, and Buenos Aires as well gets really cooking during the summer. But yeah, you get all four seasons. You get snow. You get the summer sun, beautiful falls, beautiful springs. It really is a wonderful place to live. So yeah, there's so much. Just I come here to this country and I experience the culture, and it's like a it's like a Latin America, Europe. It's really interesting. The mix. You've got people love pasta here, and on Sunday you go to the local what they call a fabrica de pasta. It's just like pizza pasta factory. It's not really a pasta factory. It's just a place that like people hand make pasta, and you buy ravioli, you buy tortellini, you buy spaghetti, you buy, they make the stuff there, and you take it away fresh. And it's very popular on Sundays. People line up, they go and they buy the pasta for Sunday, and they have a big pasta dinner for Sunday. That's kind of a tradition, and that is really a neat thing. The pasta here is fabulous. It's like on par with Italy. It's really good. And another popular dish is called an empanada, which is they you have like a meat pocket is basically what it is. Like put meat in it, or they can have like cheese. Another very popular meat is pork. You see a lot of that everywhere. And then the big thing that Argentina is really big for is their asado, the barbecue. And it's even bigger than Texas. I think they consume more meat here in Argentina per capita than anywhere in the world. And man, let me tell you, it's the barbecue here is fantastic. It really is. The asado is amazing. It's a different process. They just do it a little differently. But that is a big tradition. So you do an asado, and the asado is you bring family over, and you turn on you basically start the grill with these charcoal pieces, but they're not charcoal briquettes, or you use wood. Best barbecues where they use wood. They call that a leña, and you get the fire going, and you just put the meat on. You slow cook it for hours, and you have what they call choripans, which is sausage, pork sausage in a French style bread, and you have that with chimichurri, and you have the family gets together, and you have conversations. You have wine, you have beer, you have and other things that you drink. People like they like soft drinks here too, and you just have you make a big event of it. And that reminds me a lot of Europe, because Europe, they have, like, the French are known for their 2-hour plus lunches, right? It's conversation, and in fact, they even have a term for it, sobremesa, which means you're done with the food, but you're just sitting at the table talking, and the conversation goes on. So that kind of interface with family, really big here. And so getting back to, I think, why Argentina has a strong base, is because the family values are really big in this country. Family is everything. And Mexico is the same way. And that's kind of a European thing. Whereas, we see the process in America where they want to break that family unit up, but here it's strong, it's solid. And you see that it's reflected in things like the asado, or, family pasta dinner on Sunday, or even mate. I don't know if you know much about mate. It's another big thing down here. Mate is a drink that typically you took a gourd, you hauled out the gourd, you dried it, and then you take these leaves from a tree, the yerba tree, and they dry them, and then you put them into your mate cup, and it has a straw, but they call it a bombilla, and it's this big metal thing. It looks like it could be a pipe, In fact, someone saw me with a mate in my hand. They're, what's that? A crack pipe? And it's like, no, it's a mate. And you pass the mate around. It's a social thing. Like I pack the mate with yerba, and then I put the hot water in, and I drink it, and then I put the next round, I pass it over to the person next to me, and they drink it, they pass it back, and I keep filling it, and the mate gets passed around. And that also is it's a cultural thing. It kind of unites people. You can get together with your friends and you have mate, or family, and you pass the mate around, and typically you'll have like what they call a factura, which is like a pastry, but they do pastries here a little differently, but they're really good. And so you'll have a pastry with your mate, or you'll have an alfajor, which is it's like a cookie with dulce de leche in the middle, and a lot of times it's dipped in chocolate. So this is the kind of culinary feast you get down here. The food here is unlike anywhere else in Latin America, I think. Mexico, tacos are big, and beans and rice are really popular in Colombia, and pork and these kinds of things. Everything's fried. But then you get here, and you get this influx of European cuisine. And it really is. It's like a little Europe. So,
well, I've heard Argentina has a lot of Italian immigration. You brought up something though, and this is why I'm generally more optimistic about South America or Mexico than I am about America. As you pointed out, family is important. That has been completely thrown into the trash in America. Yeah. Where do you think they will stay that way? Or, I mean, because America used to be that way.
Yes. I don't know. I see them trying to stick the wokeism in. There's kind of
feminism
this,
in this case, yes.
yeah, and well, the wokeism too. They're trying to
Yeah.
gender neutral. They're trying to go gender neutral on some of the language. They're trying to introduce the X, like in Spanish, it's either like all, the word all is todo for masculine, or toda with an A at the end for feminine, or todos, todas.
Yes.
But they want to replace that O and A with an X and just say it's just one word, tokes. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And I see them trying to introduce it, but it's not really sticking. People aren't really that interested in it. Because it's also weird. The X is just in place of a vowel. It doesn't make any sense in Spanish. So they're trying to push this forward, but so I see it, and I think some of the universities have some of that going on, but it isn't as bad as the United States. And I don't know. I do think they could potentially be fighting an uphill battle here.
Yeah.
Because especially with the poverty, you need family to just survive. If you try to break that up, it's a non-starter. It was easier to go after America because we were more affluent up there. And so you could move out from mom and dad and you could get a job and you could subsist on your own. It's a lot harder to do here. So, but up there they got, it's the feminism is so strong. I don't need a man, blah, blah, blah. Down here, it really isn't, it's not very big. At least the women I talk to are not feminists. I haven't really met too many,
I have no idea if it inevitably happens because a country gets rich or not. That's very hard to tell. It's rather unfortunate that it does. One problem when a country does get richer, though, you definitely have more ability to support people who are just a professional class of full-time agitators.
True.
You have more parasitic college professors. And, that was something I was, going to ask you about too, is, and, I've heard this from other people, the most consistent enemies of capitalism are the college professors. I hear they're just as bad or worse, but maybe it's also because less people go to college in Argentina. I don't know if that's part of it.
Okay. That's something I don't know, but
yeah,
I don't get the feeling. Well, I need to investigate to see, but I haven't seen too many people that brag about the degrees. For one thing, from what I can tell, you go to secundaria, which is a high school, and it's a good degree, and you're done with your education, and you might go to university for other things, but it doesn't feel like that is a big push. Like you have to have your bachelor's degree or equivalent here in order to get any reasonable job. I don't think that's the case. You might need more further education for things like going into software engineering or going, obviously being a doctor and those certain fields. But my feeling is it isn't as big here as it is in my country.
Yeah.
And so it could be that because you don't have all the young minds aren't being assaulted by, these Marxist college professors, that those ideas aren't sticking, as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I also think it also gets reflected another way. I think, the growing popularity of a guy like Andrew Tate in the Western world, I think is a logical response to that. I don't think you probably would have Tate be as popular down there because Tate is a response to this decadence, and it if there is no decadence, there's no response to it.
He's a response to the emasculation of what they're trying to do to men. There is a war on men. I do agree with Andrew Tate. I think he's right about this. There is a war on men. And it's kind of born in this feminist thing, and we're losing touch of what it means to be a man. To go out to war, to go out to battle, to go out and win and be competitive and build a home for your wife and take care of you and yours. That is being thrown aside. That here is big. It's
I don't, and I don't know how you can, and you cannot, in my opinion, disconnect this from also this attitude of let's all run and hide from the big bad virus. I think that's also another part of the emasculation right there.
Yeah, you make everybody scared of their own. Make everybody scared of each other. Make everybody scared of just breathing around each other. It's all complete crap.
Yeah,
you have an immune system for a reason.
And you also being older than I am, another thing, too, is I think also part of the emasculation, is the fact that kids are not taking risks the way that they used to. I mean, whether it be, be like my grandfather as a first grader walking to school 2 miles each way. Nowadays, you go to Peru, you can see kids operating canoes on big rivers. Maybe if they're 6 years old.
Sol told me about in Brazil. She physically saw the armies, literal armies of children. They're carrying automatic weapons. I mean,
I'm not saying I'm in favor of kids carrying automatic weapons, but when you let kids go out and live and take risks and climb trees and do things that might be dangerous or at least appear to be dangerous. Whereas in America, in Peru, you might see a kid operating a canoe on a river as big as the Ohio River. If there was a kid in America, piloting a 6-year-old kid piloting a canoe on the Ohio River or like rivers around Pittsburgh,
CPS would get called.
There'd probably be all kinds of. It'd probably be a media circus says, "Oh my God, this kid's doing piloting a canoe on the river." I mean, I can just imagine, and then in the rainforest or something, it's like no big deal. It's that's just what they do.
Well, you have to grow up faster. See, I think. Okay, so you were talking about like, is it?
I don't think you want to force kids to grow up, but I think kids will naturally grow up if you allow them to grow up. Here were cases you're putting restrictions on them.
It's going back to what you were talking about. You said that, how do you convert a rich country into this just dystopian hellhole? And I think you've got to do it through the education system, and that's what they keep. Think about it. They keep kids. They keep kids in school now. Oh, you have to have a bachelor's degree. Oh, you got to get your master's. And so you're in college, you're in school, right? Up through your 20s. Those are the most productive. Those should be the most productive years. You should be building a business. You should be working. There's all these things, actually starting families. This is the time to do all that. They got people in college. And like you said, this sort of helicoptering thing where we got to protect them from these dangers.
Helicopter parents,
exactly. And the schools are doing this, and it's this education system. I blame the educational system.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They keep kids too young, too long, and they don't say, "All right, you need to start." I mean, like what was it like Henry V? I think. If you read that Shakespeare play. Henry V was a teenager, when he took over.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I know exactly.
He was a fucking teenager, and he had to grow up fast, and make some super adult decisions that affected his country, and he had to go to war. I mean, how many kids? I mean, that's I'm not saying that's the way we should be, but I'm just saying that we keep people too young for too long, and and I realize that there are biological things with kids, like the cortex, frontal cortex isn't fully developed yet. I get that, but when you're in your 20s, this should be your prime. And this is one of the things that Andrew Tate's saying is young men have testosterone. You should be hitting the gym. You should be working yourself. You should be taking advantage of that testosterone to become a warrior. Go out, step in the ring, get punched. Learn to defend yourself. Because you need to defend your family, train, make yourself as strong as possible, and then go out and become rich, learn to make money, don't just go. And he's saying that most people just go out and take a job, and then they enjoy the weekends and everything like that, and this whole path, instead of saying, you should be working like a mother scrubber to build your fortune, and this is what everybody should be doing, not just the unusual few. Everybody, most people should be rich, and we have the capability of doing it in the Western world. And yet the Marxists are teaching everybody the opposite, that, we should take from the rich. And so Tate's saying, learn to find your full potential. Stop being a lazy asshole. Get out of school, get away from that stuff, and start working. And that message is resonating with the young men, because they're seeing that, wait a second, you mean, you see so many young men, right? They have a hard time finding women, because women are very, very choosy of their mates, right?
Yeah.
Dime a dozen guys, but you can tap into that potential to become exceptional. And that's kind of what he's trying to teach people. So I think that's resonating.
Well, there's the old, and this probably isn't true, but somebody asked Mozart, hey, I'm thinking about writing a symphony. How should I get started? And and the person said, well, you're too young. Maybe you should start with the concerto. And he said, yes, but Mozart, you were writing symphonies when you were 8 years old. Says, yes, but I never asked anyone how to do it. So, that's a story. It's a.
Mozart just did it.
Let's get back here, though. Let's get back to Milei. We went way off, but I do like talking about the country and the cultural aspects. That make Argentina successful. What do you think could derail Milei, or where do you think if Milei gets in, where do you think it could go wrong? I mean, does the president have that much power to make changes, or does he still have to deal with other people who might? And there are certainly going to be people who are going to be working against him once he's in there, unless he gets a huge mandate.
Well, I mean, I believe they have a parliamentary structure. He's going to have to fight them. It's not just going to be a cakewalk. The worst possible thing that could happen is that he gets shot. And I don't know if that will actually happen or not, but that would be the worst. Okay. But he is going to have a fight. They say it's not going to just be a cakewalk. He walks on. The president isn't all powerful, but the president does have a good degree of power here. I'm still learning the political structure, because this is a new country to me. So I don't know everything, but this is my understanding from what people have told me, from what I've seen. So it isn't going to be a cakewalk, but I think he's got his work cut out for him. But I think he does have the power to bring about the dollarization. He's going to have to get people to work with him. But I think from what I've seen, like the people that are running against him, the other parties, have changed their tune considerably on taxes. We'll lower your taxes, we promise, because he's tapped into that sentiment, and they had no choice. Even the leftist front, right, Frente de Izquierda, had to turn around, and they had to backpedal and say, we'll definitely reduce your tax, because taxes are so unpopular. But of course, they're still not talking about central bank. That's actually the chief taxer, through inflation. But so from what I've seen is they've had to change their tune to try to gain some of that popularity back, because they lost all these people to Milei. So it's possible that if he got in, that they may popular sentiment may force them to start working with Milei, because they got to turn the economy around, and the only way to do that is to start liberalizing. It's to start cutting a lot of the red tape. It's to get rid of as many taxes as possible, get rid of the inflation, and make the government much more business friendly, like what they did in Chile. Unfortunately, I know that Chile is going back the other way, but that's kind of the model that he's looking at. And it's possible it could work, but he's even got to get in first. I don't know. He might not even be able to get in. So we'll see. That's my assessment of the situation so far. As I learn more, I'll tell you.
Most of my people I've talked to so far are pretty optimistic. Are pretty optimistic about him winning. I don't know how how accurate this stuff is, and I don't know what kind of dirty tricks they'll pull. You know, and it seems like it's kind of a weird system they have there. I mean, most systems, why they made it 45% instead of 50, I have no idea, but I guess that's what they wanted. Uh, you know, and you know, and and you basically, and uh, so yeah, you've not really, you've only been there a short time there, but you're definitely liking it there, and you think you're probably going to stay there for the rest of your life.
I don't know if we'll stay here for the rest of my life, but I think it's going to be a good home base to have.
Yeah,
But I definitely want to put in a few years here. It's a good place, and I'm learning a lot. And there's so much still to discover, obviously. But
yeah,
my wife, I consider her my Latin America guide. She's been my guide to Latin America. She's shown me around Mexico. She's shown me around her country. She's taught me the language. And so there's a lot, but there's still a lot. I mean, I consider myself fluent in Spanish, and I still get lost when people are talking because there's so much cultural things and little nuances and stuff that I don't understand yet. So I can't call myself an expert, but I can just give you my unvarnished view of the country, what I've seen and my impressions so far, and it's very
yeah,
favorable. It's not perfect. It's got
yeah,
problems. Don't get me wrong. There's like in this town, they have all of these dirt roads, and people are screaming at the intendant to pave the roads, and they won't do it, and there's the administration is all balled up, and then they complain they don't have enough taxes and blah blah blah. It's typical politics, right? It is, like I said,
yeah,
it's not. I've been waiting here for a month and a half for internet service, and I still don't have it. I'm still having to use my cell phone, and the cell service, as you've
yes.
experienced, is quite spotty. So it's not perfect. But
That's what, yeah, that's, I often say, if I leave America, what will I miss most? And one of the things that goes right to the top of the list for me is I will definitely miss the interstate highway system. We have a lot of infrastructure here that we don't appreciate, that would be taken, we take for granted, although we would appreciate it when we go elsewhere.
I do agree with you. And in fact, that's a note I would like to touch on. If any of your listeners and you are considering leaving the United States,
Yeah,
I Latin America is not a drop-in replacement for North America, and so it's different. If I experienced a huge culture shock just crossing the border into Mexico. It's a different
yes,
world down here. It is a different world. There, sometimes you can move into a place and the freaking water doesn't work. That happened to us when we came here. They had to repair the entire water system out front of where we were living, and the water just stopped working. Um, Electricity sometimes will just go out. Although I have to admit that since I've been here, the electricity has been rock solid, and the gas has been really good.
yeah,
But like if you go to Mexico, they don't have central gas. They don't do that. They deliver the gas in trucks, and so you have to make sure you keep your container full. So it's just little things like that. It's not the same as America. Now, having said that, you say you like the interstate system. Well, I have to say that the toll roads in Mexico are excellent. They're really good. They've done an excellent job in Mexico. And the freeway system, at least when I was in Cordoba, freeway system is really good there. They installed this brand new circunvalación, they call it, that goes all the
yeah,
way around the city. It is excellent. I was like, wow, this is California quality, So the things are improving slowly but surely. But my point is if you're going to leave, don't do it to escape America. Do it to enjoy a new perspective on the world. If you go and you live in a foreign country, you will have your perceptions will be changed. You will look at things differently. You'll look at your own country differently when you come back. Even the things that you hate, you might wind up liking because, hey, you've been away for a while and, hey, this is kind of refreshing. It happened to me. it was kind of neat to go back to California. And even with all the things that are dysfunctional and wrong, it was really fun. And I brought Sol with me and showed her around my country. And that was so fun to see the country through her eyes. So what I'm saying is we've got problems in the United States. There's no doubt about it. But there's problems everywhere. And so if you're going to go to a place that don't speak English. Learn a foreign language. Learn to speak the native language. You'll never be perfect. You won't be a native. You can study on your own and you can get good at the language. You'll never be as good as you are with your native language unless you're exceptional. But the thing about it is you will get into your mind a different way of thinking that you are not accustomed to. And you'll learn. I've lived in 2 different countries now, in Mexico and in Argentina, in addition to the United States. And it's really interesting, the differences between they're Latin American countries. There's a lot of similarities, and then there's a lot of differences. A friend of mine on Twitter said he's lived in all these different countries, and he's going from place to place, and it's like you wake up and you go, okay, where am I, and where's the freaking light switch? Because they put the light switches in different places. It's that kind of thing. But to me, that's the spice of life. You might not like. There might be somebody out there going, no, I want things to be exactly the same. Well, then don't move. Stay where you are. But be prepared for differences and things that you just take for granted. You're not going to have. What was one? Like living in Mexico, coming here, I can't find spicy food. It's hard to find, But in Mexico, it's everywhere. In the United States, Trader Joe's. I miss Trader Joe's. That's not down here. It's very expensive to import electronic equipment into Argentina. So these are the little things that. You need to get used to.
Yeah, you don't always appreciate those things until you see them, when you witness them, because you never know what the factors are going to be. I mean,
exactly.
and in Mexico, unfortunately, you end up with these, all these now American enclaves, and they're basically are the U.S. and Mexico anyway. It's like, well, I moved here to get away from the U.S., not to live in the U.S. And the way you end up having all the problems of the U.S. and the problems of Mexico, and I don't want those. I mean, I just, some of these people talk about cheap Mexico, and I said, well, what you're paying, you're paying American prices anyway. So what's the whole point of moving?
Exactly. What I found anyway. I originally moved there, and I was in an expat community, hanging around with expats. And then I met my wife, and then I started to learn Spanish. And then she and I said, we had some friends, some expats that were living in Guadalajara, and they said, hey, you should really come check this city out. We did, but we wound up not living with them. I'd see them. We'd get together for things. But we chose a neighborhood that was actually pretty far out of town, and it was Mexican. It was not. I was one of the few expats. There was one other Canadian I ran into, but pretty much they were all locals in that town. And that was one of the best things I could have ever done, because I got away from my element, and I was treated really well. They're good people. Mexicans, I will always speak highly of the Mexicans. They're wonderful people, and I felt like I was welcomed there. And I never, ever felt any racism or anything like that, culturism. I was always treated with respect. And that was a great thing. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of their culture and how they do things. And that was a really neat thing, really, really neat thing.
Yeah. If you make a sincere effort to speak Spanish, you automatically become a good person in their eyes. And I've also noticed too, though, is I think they work harder, and they appreciate a lot more what they got, and they're just, and that's important too. I'm also very conscious, don't go there and be the ugly American, which definitely has a reputation. If you start and they'll probably, and if you start acting like the ugly American, you'll lose all of that in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah. No, I
always, wherever I go, I tip, whether it's a tipping culture or not. That's one thing I do.
In Mexico, it's hugely, the tipping culture is big.
Yeah.
They're kind of expecting a tip for almost everything in Mexico. In Argentina, I found they don't, and when I do tip, they're always surprised. Like
Yeah.
somebody will bring a shipment to my house, and I'll give them a tip, and they're, oh, well, you don't have to do that, and like, well,
Yeah,
well,
I would.
thank you.
That's something I couldn't see myself tipping a FedEx delivery person or a UPS guy. But
Oh,
anyway,
in Mexico, it's kind of expected that you tip them. You tip everybody. They are expecting.
yeah,
It's a very cultural thing to tip in Mexico,
yeah.
much more so than any other place I've been in. In America, you typically tip at the restaurants, and maybe
Oh yeah.
you might tip your taxi driver possibly, but tipping is not that big. But Mexico,
That's another thing too about restaurant culture in South America. Oh my goodness, you can go out to eat and you'll be there for 2 hours. That
oh
never
yeah.
happens in America.
Oh, here's an interesting
I
cultural
mean,
point.
they bring your food out in 10 minutes, and then when you're halfway through your meal, they'll ask, "Oh, can I take your plate?" It's like, "No, I'm still eating."
Oh, in America, yeah.
Yeah,
Is everything? Do you need anything else? No, that's okay. Bam, ticket. Bill.
yeah.
You have to ask for the bill in
Oh
Latin
yeah.
American countries,
One
which is
thing I do
something
appreciate about America, though, is there's definitely more of a culture of unlimited refills.
in America.
Yeah, you don't get quite, yeah, like unlimited refills
Yeah.
on water, unlimited tea, unlimited Pepsi.
Well, the water, that's another thing is it's
Yeah,
typically you get filtered water at your table. That's
yeah.
typical in America, right?
Oh yeah,
The Here, if you ask for water, they bring you a bottle and you pay for it.
oh yeah,
So you do pay extra. Sometimes there's one place that I actually get water when it's a co-work. I can actually just get water by the glass, and I don't pay because they have a big water bottle out, and you can serve yourself. But most places, if you say water, they'll bring you bottled water that you pay for. So yeah, you're right. There's less of a refill culture down here. So
yeah,
these are little things to get used to.
yeah.
But if
Another
you
thing.
just go,
Yeah,
you know what, I'm gonna enjoy the life. I'm gonna enjoy the ride. The the
yeah,
experiences, are great. The food here is fantastic. Not if you're expecting
oh yeah,
burgers and fries, forget it. But it's that kind of thing. Even in Mexico, like man, you can find some of the best tacos on the street that you can't find. I mean, like amazing tacos. So it just depends.
oh yeah. And that's one thing about Mexico. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, one thing I want to get back to Milei again. Has
Okay.
Milei said anything? I've never asked anybody this. What has Milei said about foreign policy, or does he talk much about foreign policy at all?
I don't. The only time I've heard him speak about other
Yeah,
countries is when he
yeah,
talks about the model of like he talks about Ecuador dollarizing, he talks about
yeah.
Zimbabwe,
But I mean,
but he
does
doesn't.
he want to take back the Malvinas, that kind of thing?
I have never heard him talk about that.
You
If
know.
if he does feel that way, I think he probably would be against that.
Yes.
Because that's a war, and Argentina could not afford a war.
Yeah.
Even though, oh my God, that's everywhere. They say the what are they? The Falcons are Argentina. That's like
Falkland
everywhere.
Islands, or as they call them,
Falkland Islands are
Las Malvinas.
Malvinas.
Yes.
Las Malvinas son Argentinas, and that's
Yes.
like everywhere. That's an official government slogan. They're still hanging on to that.
Yeah.
But he's not said a word that I've seen about reclaiming that. He really doesn't
Yeah.
talk too much about international anything. He doesn't talk about making deals or anything. The only thing he seems to be focused solely on fixing the money problem
Yeah.
here and fixing the security problem here. He says, it's some places are unsafe to go out on the street because the police can't do their jobs, and he wants the police to be able to do the job that you would expect the police to be able to do, and that's keep the streets safe.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
South America has been free from a lot of the big worldwide skirmishes. I mean, they weren't really impacted much by World War One or World War Two, and it's been relatively peaceful among the own countries. I mean, I can't think of the last time there was a boundary change in South America. It's been at least maybe 100 years.
well, the Falklands that war was the
Yeah,
most recent war,
yeah, that was the
and
most recent war at all. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, the
and
what's going on now, I think, and I think he's kind of touched on this a little bit, is the problems with the Chinese government. because the Chinese are coming in trying to buy up land like crazy. They want, to set up their cities here, and I think that's a big sticking point. None of the countries really want that here. And nobody trusts the communist government, that's for sure. So
that's very refreshing.
yeah,
America's completely bow down for China.
yeah,
I think in a lot of ways China controls the country, even possibly more than Israel does.
Well, they certainly controlled the COVID response.
Oh yeah, absolutely ridiculous. That's another thing too, though. You don't have foreign governments lobbying, the government. I suppose it helps a lot that they're just, there are probably a lot more people in China that learn English than learn Spanish.
Yes.
Although that way, you just can't. It just makes it harder for China to go into any Spanish country and screw around like the way they screw up. America. Hollywood, for example. They will censor their films for China. All of our big tech companies bend over for China, and I don't know. Maybe there's a little more. Maybe there's a little more ethnocentrism down there. Too, that just says we're not gonna do things the Chinese way. We'll do things our way.
Well, two examples I can think of. In Mexico, foreigners can't buy land like within 100 kilometers or 300 kilometers of the coast. In Mexico, they call that a security zone. They have something similar here in Argentina, and my understanding is those were implemented as a direct response to the Chinese came and they were just buying up property on the
beach
coast.
Property, yeah.
Yeah. And they put a stop to it. And so you can do it, but you have to have a bank hold the title. A foreigner can't hold the title. And the same thing is going on here. You can't buy within like 100 kilometers of the border or something like that.
Yeah. There's always certain defensible things where you have to be able to defend the country in certain ways. Something I've heard about Rio, too, is Rio stays peaceful because the rich and the poor people all have equal access to the beach. The rich people can go to the beach, the poor people can go to the beach. It doesn't matter. You still.
Well, in Mexico, as I understand it, you can't actually own the beach. You can own property up to the beach, but the beach itself is by law public. You cannot have a private beach, apparently. So, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So, they want to make sure that it's open for. There are pluses and minuses to doing that. But like, for example, there's one place that I used to love to go to called Bambuda, where it's a holistic center and beautiful place right there on the beach south of Bonfil in Acapulco. And it's beautiful. It's beach access. She's got a beautiful place there. The lady that owns it name's Vistara, and her husband Christian. But these people come flying by on their little motos, the four wheelers that they run out on the beach, and they're running up and down, and it's just like you can't get rid of these people.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't have private property. There's pluses and minuses. It's good and bad. So there's two different ways, I guess you can look at it. So
before we go, there's one thing I did want to talk about. What did you think of the HBO series The Anarchists? Because you were mentioned there. For example, Henza got shot, and you actually put up your credit card so Henza could get the medical care that he needed. You arguably saved Jason Henza's life.
It's funny that they didn't even put that in the show at all.
Maybe I heard that from other people. I heard that because I certainly know some people who were there. I had an I don't know if you saw my video, but I interviewed Avi about Anarchapulco in the series. Mm-hmm. That wonderful woman who used to be Nathan's assistant. Really worked hard at that 1 year. She was awesome.
Oh no, I haven't seen that. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, you'll have to check that out. Yeah, and I'll probably link to that too.
It was kind of I liked the show. Yeah. Although I know some people were angry with it.
Yeah.
But I thought Todd did a pretty fair job representing what was going on. I was just a little like confused and okay, slightly miffed. It's like, wow, I'm not even mentioned at all. But I am all over the place in there. I have these cameos. It's pretty funny. Like in Bambuda, I'm doing some yoga pose or something, and I'm like meditating, and I'm in the background, and it's really funny. So I'm like all over the place, but my name's never mentioned.
Yeah.
So my interface with Jason was never mentioned, which I thought was really weird. But we did an interview about it and everything, but
Yeah.
I was told that like the interview didn't fit in, and I, sometimes like when you're into film and you have to tell a story, you got to cut out a subplot or something that just slows things down. And you go, well, that's the breaks. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I saved Jason's life, not so I could brag about it on the Anarchist. I saved his life because it was the right thing to do at the time. As a matter of fact, when I found out that their house was under assault and men with guns were up there on the hill, I didn't just break out running up the hill. I was scared. And I kind of felt a little bad about that. I felt bad that I didn't just drop everything and run up the hill.
Yeah.
And which I will give credit to Michael Alexander for that, because he did. He dropped everything. His house is up there near theirs, and he stepped across John's dead body to try to find people that were alive in the house. So I thought, well, if I can't help them on the hill, but besides, by the time I found out about it, it was too late anyway. All of it had already passed. And when I found out that Michael was down in the hospital, I thought, well, I'm going to go and do what I can to help. I didn't even know Jason Hinza. I never even met him. And that's why I didn't see, because I wasn't friends with him on Facebook, I didn't see the call for help. I heard about it secondhand. And so I went to the hospital. And that's when I met Jason, but they were going to kick him out because of his credit card doesn't work. I'm like, you're not kicking him out. You're going to use my credit card. I don't know who you are. I couldn't save John, right? I couldn't help Lily at the time, but you're friends with John and Lily, so I'm going to help you.
If you don't mind me asking, what was the bill?
Oh, it was like 10,000 pesos or something, 10,000 pesos.
Okay, and we're looking at about 20 to 1, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it was like I didn't even care I don't even remember what the bill was.
10,000 pesos. We're looking at like $500 to treat a guy with it for a gunshot wound. What would that cost in America? I don't want to know.
Cheap. It's cheap. I mean, really.
What would that cost in America though? If you'll get charged $500 just to walk into an emergency room and have them tell you nothing's wrong with you.
You're probably looking at least $10,000. Probably. Yeah. So I remember
it's actually more dollars than pesos. That's scary.
I remember I broke my finger and I went in to the clinic in California, and I go in at night in the clinic and they x-ray it, they look at it, yeah, it's broken. And I say, okay, so can you set it? And they're like, I can't do that. Funny, it says MD on on your name collar, your tag. Well, I can't do that. You have to come in and see your primary care physician. I don't have a primary care physician. Well, they had me go through some rigmarole. I come in the next day, so I have to sleep with this thing, and I have come in the next day, and the doctor looks at, yep, it's okay. We're looking at the X-rays. Yes, definitely broken, and so you can set it. Oh no, you have to make an appointment with the general surgeon. Why? It's a fucking broken finger. It is like, no, you have to make an appointment, and I'll come back later. So I come back later, and the guy's like, I want to put you under general anesthetic. And I'm like, it's a broken finger. I grew up I don't know about you, but I grew up with a family doctor who would have been able to set it in 5 minutes and charge me an office visit. So the guy, so look, if you don't do it, then I'm going to just set it myself. All right, shoots me with Novocaine or, a local anesthetic, and then sets the thing. And it was just like, what a weird experience. And they charged me $1,000 for that. And that was back in like 2005. Sure, it's worse. And that's crazy.
Any experience with healthcare in Argentina?
Well, no, directly, no. But I have a friend of mine who actually has been diagnosed with severe cancer. He's old. He's in his 80s, and he was in a lot of pain. He goes in, but it was like what they call a private hospital that you can go to. I don't know what the prices are. I have no idea, but I think they've got a public system. It's like Mexico. They got private hospitals and public
That seems
hospitals.
to be what they have a lot.
Yeah.
They have the public
Yeah.
system and they have the private system. The socialists dreamed of healthcare for everybody, and then there's this private system that the rich people use. So the socialist dream still gets lousy healthcare for the
masses,
the poor, and
yeah,
people who can afford it still get good healthcare if they can,
right.
if they even get good healthcare.
But I would assume that it's probably, roughly equivalent to Mexico as far as prices go.
Yeah.
And well, my experience, of course, was in the hospital with Jason Hinza. That was my first experience with medicine in Latin America. So, but yeah, that was an interesting situation. Overall, like I said, is the anarchists, I felt like they did treat the subject as fairly as they could. They were giving everybody's sides. They actually exhibited a lot of the philosophy that underlies what's going on. In the end, it was pretty neat. But it was also kind of an emotional roller coaster ride for me because I lived it, and there was some moments that were pretty tough for me to watch. But overall, it was a pretty interesting thing to have that be so national,
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It definitely was very interesting. Well, anything else you think we need to talk about with Milei?
No, I'm excited. I wish him the best. I hope he makes it in office. We need to see change in this country. I'm excited for the future. But no matter what, it's still a great place to live, even if he doesn't get in. So,
and maybe they'll go in the right direction, So, So thank you, Doug. You don't have a website or anything, do you?
I got if you were interested in checking out my e-commerce store, it's dougsdojo.com. That's DOUGSDOJO.com. And I've got all kinds of electronics and pet supplies and interesting stuff. My main focus is replacement remotes, believe it or not. People like the remotes. So if you want to come on down, give my store a check out, see what you think. And that's where you can also reach me if you like.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah. Please like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, follow the channel, go check out my Substack, and go buy my novel, Escape from the Village. I'm Chris Baker, and we are out.